In the past, I've done a couple projects together with Alpha Model to show you guys what their kits are actually like to be built. Now, there are a few more on the horizon, first of which is the Mclaren 720S. So as always, let's have a look at the box and the general contents and then go into a bit more detail further on in the video. So when you're looking at the total part count of this kit, it is not as high as your standard plastic injection molded kit. Mostly those kits have a lot of parts for the engine, the chassis, and all stuff that will probably never ever be seen. Now in this case, most of the parts that are made for these kits are for the details. I'm talking about some of the additional photo etch parts, but also a lot of incredible details on the interior and exterior. The chassis on these kits is a bit simple, but that to me is totally fine, as it will be hidden anyway, and therefore it's good enough that they pay attention to the exterior and interior, which is for me the most fun to build and also to show you guys. So let's go through the parts for the interior and check those out. So for the interior, you get a whole lot of resin molded parts and also a small part of some photo etch sheet with some of the speaker grills and mesh. There is also a bigger sheet with more details, but that will come later. So a lot of the parts are molded in one bigger piece, and then the additional smaller details like on the dashboard for the vents, some of the controls, even some of the extra layup panels, which can be painted in different colors, come molded separately. So it's a lot easier to paint and detail this and make it look good and clean, as if this would be masked off, it's a lot harder to get that looking nice and sharp. And with this part now being separate, it's a lot easier to get that cool color differentiation and building it in a nice finish overall. So for instance, this is a sprue with a lot of these parts that I just mentioned. All of the vents are molded separately, making a really nice component which is highly detailable, and a lot of the other smaller panels which need to have different colors are also molded in a separate part and piece to add additional details and just make it look a lot better overall. So the amount of detail that they've gone through is really nicely shown in this center console piece. All of the parts are crisp, nice, and look to be there and correct to the actual reference of the car. If that first small sheet of photo etch wasn't enough for the additional details on the interior, then this second one must please the eyes. There are a lot more small buttons, even the pedals, and some other details from all around to be added here. And of course it also has some of the mesh exterior trim and molding for on the exterior, and also a nice set of brake discs. So as mentioned in the intro of the video, the chassis isn't really that much to talk about. It does have some nice wheels for front and rear, which are different widths, and I'm pretty sure also a different diameter. The tires are nice and cleanly molded in some black rubber, and overall just look really good. In addition to those photo etch discs, there is also a core for these discs to make them a bit thicker and not all be made out of metal, which is just a simple resin plate. They include some calipers for the front and rear as well, and also some of the e-brake calipers too. The wheels are mounted in the same way they have been with all of their kits, just a simple block, a screw to go through them, and just glue it all together, with some also pre-positioned points for the calipers to glue in as well. The main chassis piece is molded in one big flat piece. It does have some detail underneath, but not that much to mention, and also a small point of the rear splitter, which is nice and flat, has some of these uprights as well, and is a good piece to be fully carbon fiber decaled out. So on that main big sheet of photo etch, there were a lot of the exterior vents as well, and then there are even a couple more to be added to it. Now the fun thing is that this needs to be bent in a pretty complicated shape, and they even added a mold system to do that in the kit as well. So we have one half of the mold, which is the one side, and of course then there is the other side as well. You put these two together with the photo etch piece in between, and then just press them tightly, and it should form the part nicely. Just like the interior, the exterior is also thought out extremely well, with pretty much no detail left behind. All of the parts that needed to either be a different color or were too complicated to be put together in one are molded separately and nicely at that. So as you can see, the doors are molded separately and they can just be put in easily. But the reason this is done, of course, is because of all of the sharp angles and holes behind the door. You just put it in and you can paint it all together if you want, or as a separate piece if you so desire. The mold lines on all of these parts are also incredibly pretty much non-existent. They are all underneath and therefore hidden really well and doesn't really require any cleanup. When looking at the additional details on the body, like all of the panel lines, they are nice and deep already, don't really need that much attention, but it is always nice to go over them quickly just to make them a bit deeper or fix them up here and there if necessary. Now alongside the main body you of course get the two door panels as well, and a variety of extra additional parts too. A lot of the vents and scoops also come molded separately, and in this case I'm going to apply a lot of carbon fiber, so that's a real good thing on this kit, as it's nice to have them as a separate piece instead of molded into the body, which makes it a lot easier to cover them in carbon and also paint them in a different color for the base underneath the carbon. So just like all the vents, even the front and rear splitter come molded separately as well. It's a pretty complicated shape, but I think it can be done in carbon fiber and made to look nicely. Same goes for the rear diffuser too. A lot of complicated angles here and there, but it should be doable. Now the fun thing about this kit is that it of course also has a spoiler, which is molded separately, so you can decide if you want to have it raised or lowered in the position on the stanced model. To complement the interior and exterior even further, there are also a couple sheets of decals with additional details. On this one you have a couple of the logos and emblems for on the calipers, for on the wheels, and also a couple more of the instrument buttons and clusters for on the interior. You also get a set of spare ones, not really sure why, but it's also always good to have. And then there are some metal transfers as well for additional detailing with chrome parts. And of course, finally, the clear parts. These can't really be left out. You have 1 or 2 sprues, in this case, with some molded clear resin, which looks really nice and crisp, and add an additional 3D part to those parts, of course. And then there is also a sheet of pre-cut and pre-painted, or at least the black outline is pre-painted for all of the other clear parts around. Now, one of the big letdowns for me, and this is one of the harder parts to actually get to look nice, are these parts, as they are flat, but they actually need to be curved, round, or at least not glued together on a flat surface. It is a lot harder to glue these in place nicely and have them conform to the shape. So if you guys have any suggestions on how to make that easier, please let me know down in the comments below.